The doctor looked at the millionaire's wife's ultrasound and warned him to divorce her immediately. What happened next left everyone shocked. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty cover your hearts with peace, blessings, and endless joy. Every story I create is not just a tale, it is my soul, my sleepless nights, and my love poured out only for you. I ask you with all my heart, please watch each story till the very last moment. Every ending carries the deepest twist, the hidden beauty, and the reward of my hard work. When you stay with me to the end, you give value to my love, my effort, and my promise to never fail you. If your heart is true, comment present. If your loyalty is real, comment I am with Mr. Peter. And to my new family, if you ever doubt me, ask the old family. They will tell you how I gave without limits, how I carried this family with pure love, and how every story is my gift to you. This channel is more than stories. It is our home, our bond, and our journey together. Stay with me, believe in me, and let's rise together, one beautiful story at a time. Money can buy everything except the one thing that makes a man truly wealthy, and Benjamin Lucas was about to discover he was the poorest billionaire alive. The crystal chandelier in the Lucas family dining room had witnessed 3 generations of power, betrayal, and broken dreams. Tonight, it would witness the beginning of the end of everything Benjamin Lucas believed about love. Benjamin Lucas sat at the head of the mahogany table that cost more than most people's houses, his fingers drumming against polished wood with restless energy of a man who owned the world but couldn't control his destiny. At 34, he commanded a $20 billion media empire spanning continents, earned respect from world leaders, and struck fear into competitors' hearts. Yet tonight, he felt like a condemned man counting down his final hours. The golden clock on the mantelpiece ticked mercilessly toward his 35th birthday, just 11 months away. 11 months to fulfill his father's ultimatum, or watch everything his family had built for a century dissolve into charitable donations. Still brooding about father's will, darling? Helena Lucas's voice sliced through silence like silk wrapped around steel. Benjamin's stepmother entered wearing crimson that complemented her predatory smile. At 45, Helena possessed beauty born from expensive surgeries and ruthless ambition that had captured his 70-year-old father's heart and fortune. Benjamin's jaw tightened. I'm thinking about my wife. Oh yes, sweet Daisy. Helena's manicured fingers traced a priceless Ming vase as she spoke, tone dripping false sympathy. 3 years of marriage and still no little Lucas running through these halls. How tragic for a media empire that controls news networks across 12 countries. The words struck their target perfectly. The Lucas media empire wasn't just money, it was influence over global information, satellite networks, and digital platforms that shaped public opinion worldwide. Benjamin's father, Charles Lucas, had made his conditions crystal clear in his revised will: produce a blood heir by age 35, or the entire empire would be donated to charity, leaving both Benjamin and Helena's son Adrian with nothing. Charles's way of ensuring the Lucas name continued through generations. Helena had married into this empire 15 years ago, a beautiful widow with a 10-year-old son and a hunger for power that had taken Charles decades to recognize. She'd studied the Lucas family like a scholar, learning their weaknesses, their medical histories, their deepest fears about legacy and bloodline. Daisy and I are trying, Benjamin said quietly, hating how defensive he sounded. Trying. Helena savored the word like fine wine. Such an interesting choice of words. Some women, Benjamin, are simply not built for bearing children. Perhaps it's time to consider alternatives. Before Benjamin could respond, the sound of heels clicking against marble announced another arrival. Adrian Lucas, Helena's 28-year-old son from her first marriage, entered with the casual arrogance of someone who believed the world owed him everything. Though not blood-related to Benjamin, Adrian had been raised as a Lucas since age 10 and possessed their father's sharp intellect and their mother's cunning manipulation. "Brother," Adrian's voice boomed with false warmth as he embraced Benjamin. "I was just telling Mother how sorry I feel for you and Daisy. The pressure you must be under, it's enough to destroy any marriage." Benjamin studied his stepbrother's face, searching for sincerity and finding only calculation. "Daisy and I are fine." "Of course you are," Adrian agreed too quickly. "But you know what they say about stress affecting fertility. Maybe you should consider seeing a specialist. I know an excellent doctor who—" "We have doctors." Helena and Adrian exchanged a glance so brief that anyone else might have missed it. But Benjamin had grown up in a house where looks could kill reputations and silence could scream secrets. He'd learned to read the unspoken language of his family's ambitions. "Where is Daisy tonight?" Helena asked, settling into her chair with feline grace. "I do hope she's not feeling unwell again." The question struck Benjamin like a physical blow. For the past month, Daisy had been experiencing strange symptoms: fatigue, nausea, dizziness. She'd insisted it was just stress from the approaching deadline, but Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening. "She's resting," he replied, glancing toward the ceiling where their bedroom lay in darkness. "Perhaps I should check on her," Helena offered, already rising from her chair. "A woman's touch can be so comforting during difficult times." "No." Benjamin's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. Helena's smile faltered for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath her maternal facade. The dining room fell silent, except for the ticking of that damned clock. Each second felt like a judgment, each minute a reminder of everything Benjamin stood to lose. Not just the money or the power. Those were simply tools. But the Lucas name, the legacy his great-grandfather had built from nothing, the empire that employed thousands of families, all of it would vanish if he failed to produce an heir. "You know," Adrian said, breaking the tension with practiced ease, "I've been thinking about the irony of Father's will. Here we are, one of the most powerful families in the world, and our entire future depends on biology. It's almost primitive." Helena's laugh was like ice crystals forming in warm air. "Your father has always been a romantic at heart. He believes in the power of bloodlines, the importance of legitimate heirs. It's quite old-fashioned, really." Benjamin felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. His father's obsession with legitimate heirs had shaped every aspect of Benjamin's life. Charles Lucas had married 3 times. First to Benjamin's mother, who died in childbirth with their second child, then to a socialite who proved infertile, and finally to Helena, who brought Adrian into the family but never bore Charles another son. The sound of footsteps on the marble staircase made all 3 heads turn. Daisy Lucas descended like an angel floating down from heaven, her dark skin glowing against the white silk nightgown that flowed around her pregnant form. Wait, pregnant form. Benjamin's heart stopped beating for exactly 3 seconds before exploding into a rhythm that threatened to break his ribs. Daisy moved with the careful grace of early pregnancy, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach, her eyes bright with a secret that would change everything. "Benjamin," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of miracles and the promise of salvation, "we need to talk." Helena's fork clattered against her plate. Adrian's wineglass froze halfway to his lips. The crystal chandelier seemed to dim, as if even the light understood the magnitude of this moment. Daisy walked to Benjamin's chair and knelt beside him, taking his trembling hands in her warm, steady ones. "I went to see Dr. Peterson today. The tests came back positive. We're going to have a baby." The words hit the room like a nuclear explosion. Benjamin felt tears burning behind his eyes as he pulled Daisy into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her body against his. After 3 years of hoping, praying, and trying, their miracle had finally happened. "How far along?" he whispered against her ear. "6 weeks," she murmured back. "I wanted to be sure before I told you." Benjamin pulled back to look at her face, seeing his own joy reflected in her dark eyes. But over Daisy's shoulder he caught sight of Helena's expression, and his blood turned to ice water in his veins. Helena wasn't smiling. She wasn't congratulating them or sharing in their happiness. Instead, her face had gone completely blank, as if someone had erased all emotion and left only cold, calculating intelligence behind. Her eyes were fixed on Daisy with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Adrian, meanwhile, had gone pale beneath his carefully maintained tan. His hands gripped his wineglass so tightly that Benjamin could see white knuckles against tan skin. "Well," Helena said finally, her voice perfectly modulated and completely empty. "How wonderful. A baby. Just in time." The way she said "just in time" made Benjamin's skin crawl. There was something in her tone, something that suggested she found the timing suspicious rather than miraculous. "We should celebrate," Adrian added, but his smile looked like it had been carved from wood. "This calls for champagne, though of course Daisy can't drink now, can she?" Daisy pressed closer to Benjamin, and he realized she was trembling slightly. His protective instincts flared to life as he stood, keeping one arm around his wife. "We're going to bed," he announced. "Daisy needs her rest." "Of course," Helena purred. "Rest is so important during pregnancy, especially during the first trimester, when things can be so uncertain." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Benjamin felt Daisy's sharp intake of breath and knew she'd heard it too. As they climbed the stairs together, Benjamin's mind raced with possibilities and dangers he'd never considered before. His family's reaction to the pregnancy had revealed something darker than disappointment. It had revealed fear. Helena and Adrian weren't just concerned about losing their place in the Lucas dynasty, they were terrified of it. And terrified people, Benjamin knew from years of business warfare, were capable of anything. Behind them, the crystal chandelier continued to cast its light over the dining room, where Helena and Adrian sat in perfect silence, their faces masks of civilized hatred. The game had begun, and Daisy, beautiful, innocent, pregnant Daisy, didn't even know she was already a target. Chapter 2. The Poison Tongue. The most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in medical authority and delivered by someone you've trusted your entire life. Dr. Robert Morrison had delivered 3 generations of Lucas babies, witnessed their first breaths, and guided their families through every medical crisis for 30 years. His office walls displayed photographs of Lucas children he'd brought into the world, graduation announcements, wedding invitations, and thank you cards spanning a lifetime devoted to one family's health and happiness. Which made his phone call to Benjamin 3 days after Daisy's announcement devastating. "Benjamin, I need you in my office immediately." Dr. Morrison's voice carried urgency that sent ice through Benjamin's veins. "Alone. Don't bring Daisy. What I must tell you, it changes everything." Benjamin sat in the parking lot outside Morrison's medical building for 10 minutes, staring at the familiar brick facade where he'd received countless vaccinations as a child, where he'd been treated for broken bones from polo accidents, where he'd come for his pre-marriage physical 3 years ago. This building held the history of his health, his family's genetic legacy, their medical secrets. The waiting room felt different today. The cheerful yellow walls seemed sickly, the children's toys scattered across the carpet looked abandoned, and the receptionist's smile felt forced. Benjamin's hands shook as he signed in, his signature barely legible across the familiar clipboard. "Mr. Lucas?" Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway, his usually warm demeanor replaced by something Benjamin had never seen before, pity mixed with professional concern. "Please, come in." The examination room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Dr. Morrison closed the door with unusual care, checked that it was locked, and drew the blinds before turning to face Benjamin. His weathered hands held a thick manila folder that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "Benjamin, what I'm about to tell you will be the hardest thing you've ever heard. I've wrestled with whether to share this information, but as your family's physician, as someone who's watched you grow from a boy into a man, I can't let you live a lie." Benjamin's mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Morrison opened the folder and spread its contents across his desk like evidence in a murder trial. Genetic charts, medical records, laboratory reports, and photographs that made no immediate sense, but radiated authority and scientific certainty. "Your wife's pregnancy," Dr. Morrison began, his voice heavy with reluctant truth. "I've been analyzing the initial blood work, comparing it against your family's comprehensive genetic history that we've maintained for decades. Benjamin, the markers in this child's DNA, they're impossible." What Benjamin didn't know was that Dr. Morrison's gambling debts had reached $500,000, and Helena had quietly paid them off 3 months ago. The doctor who had delivered Benjamin into the world, who had treated his childhood injuries and guided his family through medical crises, had been bought with money and desperation. "Impossible how?" Benjamin's voice came out as a whisper. Dr. Morrison pointed to a complex chart filled with genetic sequences that looked like a foreign language. "The Lucas family has very specific genetic traits that have been documented for 4 generations. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, you, all carry these distinctive markers. They're like a genetic fingerprint as unique as your family name." Benjamin leaned forward, trying to make sense of the scientific jargon. "And this child doesn't carry those markers. More importantly, it carries genetic sequences that are absolutely incompatible with your DNA. Benjamin, based on these results, you cannot be the biological father of your wife's baby." The words hit Benjamin like a physical blow. The room tilted sideways, and he gripped the arms of his chair to keep from falling. That's impossible. Daisy wouldn't." "I'm sorry, son." Dr. Morrison's use of the familial term felt like salt in a fresh wound. "I've triple-checked these results. I've compared them against your genetic profile from your birth, your childhood medical records, even your recent physical examination. The science is conclusive." Benjamin stared at the papers spread before him, seeing his entire world crumble into meaningless data points and statistical impossibilities. "There has to be a mistake. Labs make errors all the time." "I thought the same thing, Doctor," Morrison admitted. "So I sent samples to 3 different laboratories, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Stanford. All came back with identical results. I'm afraid there's no mistake." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Benjamin's mind raced through the past 6 weeks, analyzing every interaction with Daisy, every moment they'd shared, searching for signs he'd missed. Had she been acting differently? Had there been lies hidden behind her loving smiles? "The timing is particularly troubling," Dr. Morrison continued gently. 6 weeks ago would place conception right around the time of your business trip to Tokyo. You were gone for 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. Benjamin's head snapped up. "How do you know about my travel schedule?" "Your father mentioned it during his last checkup. He was worried about the stress you were under, the pressure of the inheritance deadline. He asked me to keep an eye on both you and Daisy." Something cold settled in Benjamin's stomach. "My father knows about this." "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. But Benjamin, he'll have to know eventually. The inheritance provisions are very specific about legitimate heirs. If this child isn't yours." The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Not only was Benjamin's marriage built on a foundation of lies, but his family's entire future hung in the balance. The Lucas empire, the legacy, the employees who depended on them, all of it would disappear because his wife had betrayed him at the most crucial moment possible. Who? Benjamin's voice was barely audible. Who is the father? Dr. Morrison hesitated, his fingers drumming against the desk in a nervous rhythm. The genetic markers suggest someone of mixed European and Asian descent. The preliminary analysis indicates possible connections to several prominent business families in the region. Benjamin's mind immediately went to Marcus Chen, his former business partner and closest friend, until their falling out 2 years ago. Marcus was brilliant, charming, and had always shown perhaps too much interest in Daisy during business dinners. Their partnership had ended acrimoniously when Benjamin discovered Marcus trying to steal clients and proprietary technology. Marcus Chen, Benjamin said flatly. Dr. Morrison's expression confirmed his suspicions. The genetic profile is consistent with that possibility. The revelation hit Benjamin like a tsunami of betrayal. Not only had his wife been unfaithful, but she'd chosen to betray him with the one person who'd already tried to destroy his business empire. The symmetry was too perfect, too cruel to be coincidental. "There's more, Doctor," Morrison said quietly. "I've been reviewing Daisy's medical history, looking for patterns. She's been seeing a fertility specialist without your knowledge for the past 6 months, Dr. James Patterson, who has a clinic downtown." Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. "What kind of treatments?" "The records are confidential, but I have contacts in the medical community. It appears she was receiving hormone injections and specialized consultations. The timing suggests she was actively trying to conceive, but not necessarily with you." The room felt like it was closing in around Benjamin. Every breath became a struggle as the full scope of his wife's deception revealed itself. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake born from loneliness during his business trip. This was calculated, premeditated betrayal designed to secure her position in the Lucas family just as time was running out. "She's been planning this," Benjamin said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "It appears that way, Doctor." Morrison agreed sadly. "I'm sorry, Benjamin. I wish I didn't have to be the one to tell you this." Benjamin stared at the genetic charts until the numbers blurred together into meaningless symbols. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of sharing dreams about their future children, 3 years of believing in a love that had apparently been nothing but an elaborate performance. "What do I do?" The question escaped before Benjamin could stop it, making him sound like the lost child he suddenly felt like. Dr. Morrison gathered the papers back into their folder with gentle efficiency. "That's not a medical decision, son. That's about your heart, your family, your future. But I will say this, the longer you wait to address this situation, the more complicated it will become, both legally and emotionally." Benjamin stood on unsteady legs, feeling decades older than when he'd entered the room. "Does anyone else know?" "No one, and it will stay that way until you decide how to proceed. But Benjamin, your father's health isn't what it used to be. The stress of potentially losing the family legacy, it could kill him." The weight of responsibility settled on Benjamin's shoulders like a lead blanket. Not only did he have to deal with his personal devastation, but he had to protect his father's fragile health and somehow salvage the Lucas dynasty from the wreckage of his marriage. As Benjamin walked toward the door, Dr. Morrison's voice stopped him one final time. "Benjamin, I know this is impossible to hear right now, but you're still young. You can rebuild from this. Don't let one woman's betrayal destroy everything your family has worked to create." Benjamin nodded without turning around, not trusting his voice to remain steady. He walked through the waiting room like a ghost, past the cheerful yellow walls that now seemed to mock his pain, past the children's toys that reminded him of the family he'd thought he was about to have. In the parking lot, he sat in his car for an hour, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror and trying to recognize the broken man looking back at him. Somewhere in the distance, his phone buzzed with text messages from Daisy asking when he'd be home, telling him about her day, sharing her excitement about their future. Their future, built on lies, betrayal, and the ultimate cruelty of false hope. Benjamin started the engine and drove home to face the woman who had destroyed his world while pretending to give him everything he'd ever wanted. With each mile, his broken heart hardened into something darker, something that would change the course of all their lives forever. Chapter 3. The Heart's Earthquake. The cruelest torture isn't the pain of betrayal. It's having to smile at the person who destroyed you while they still believe you love them. Benjamin Lucas had always prided himself on his poker face. In boardrooms across 3 continents, he'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without revealing emotion. He'd stared down corporate raiders, government officials, and international competitors with ice-cold control that made the Lucas name synonymous with power. But sitting across from his wife at breakfast 3 days after Dr. Morrison's revelation, watching her glow with pregnancy and innocent joy, Benjamin discovered that years of emotional discipline meant nothing when your heart was being systematically destroyed by the person you loved most. "I've been thinking about names," Daisy said, her dark eyes sparkling as she spread organic jam across her whole wheat toast. "For a boy, maybe Charles after your father. And for a girl." She paused, her hand drifting unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "What was your mother's name again?" "Elizabeth." The word came out like broken glass. Daisy's smile could have powered the entire city. "Elizabeth Lucas. That's beautiful. She would have been so happy to have a granddaughter." Benjamin's coffee tasted like ash in his mouth. His mother had died giving birth to his stillborn sister when Benjamin was 7 years old. The tragedy had shaped his father's obsession with legitimate heirs and the continuation of the Lucas bloodline. Now, 27 years later, his wife was planning to name another man's child after the woman whose death had created the very inheritance crisis this pregnancy was supposed to solve. The irony was so cruel, it was almost artistic. "Benjamin?" Daisy's voice carried a note of concern. "You seem distant this morning. Are you feeling all right?" He forced himself to look at her, really look at her, searching for signs of deception in the face he'd memorized over 3 years of marriage. Her skin had the luminous quality that early pregnancy often brought. Her hair was softer and more lustrous than ever, and her eyes held nothing but love and excitement for their future. Either she was the most accomplished actress in the world, or she genuinely believed the child she carried was his. "I'm fine," he lied, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Just thinking about work." "You work too much." Daisy reached across the table to cover his hand with hers, and Benjamin had to suppress the urge to pull away. Her touch, once a source of comfort and desire, now felt like a brand marking him as a fool. "Maybe it's time to start delegating more. We're going to have a baby to think about now." A baby. Benjamin's jaw clenched involuntarily. Whose baby? How long had she been planning this deception? Had Marcus Chen been laughing at him during those business dinners where Benjamin had proudly introduced his beautiful wife? Had they shared secret glances while Benjamin discussed quarterly projections and market expansions? "Have you thought about telling your family?" Daisy continued, oblivious to the storm raging behind Benjamin's carefully controlled expression. "I know your father will be over the moon. And Helena, well, she'll probably be relieved that the inheritance issue is resolved." The mention of Helena sent a chill down Benjamin's spine. His stepmother's reaction to the pregnancy announcement had been strange, too controlled, too calculating. But now, armed with the knowledge of Daisy's betrayal, her behavior made perfect sense. Helena was many things, But she wasn't stupid. She would have seen through Daisy's deception immediately and realized that this pregnancy, rather than securing the Lucas legacy, might actually destroy it entirely. "I'll tell Father when the time is right," Benjamin said carefully. "When the time is right?" Daisy laughed, the sound like silver bells that now grated against Benjamin's nerves. "Darling, I'm pregnant with his grandchild. Every moment we wait is a moment stolen from his joy." Grandchild. The word hit Benjamin like a physical blow. Charles Lucas, already weakened by age and the stress of potentially losing his family's empire, would be devastated to learn that his hoped-for heir was actually the product of his daughter-in-law's affair. The shock might literally kill him. Benjamin's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Without thinking, he glanced at the screen and saw Marcus Chen's name. His blood turned to ice as he read the message. "Heard congratulations are in order. Hope you're both happy. We should get together soon." The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Marcus hadn't contacted Benjamin in over a year, not since their business relationship had ended in mutual accusations and threats of lawsuits. Now, just days after Daisy's pregnancy announcement, he was suddenly interested in renewing their friendship. "Who's texting?" Daisy asked innocently, but Benjamin caught the slight tension in her voice. "No one important." Benjamin slipped the phone into his pocket, his mind racing. Did Marcus know about the pregnancy? Had Daisy told him? Were they still in contact despite her claims of faithfulness? The questions multiplied like cancer cells, each one more devastating than the last. Benjamin felt like he was drowning in a sea of deception, grasping for any piece of truth he could find. "I have to go," he said abruptly, standing from the table. "But you barely touched your breakfast." Daisy's brow furrowed with concern. "Benjamin, you're really worrying me. You've been acting strange ever since I told you about the baby. Aren't you happy?" Happy? The question was so absurd it was almost funny. Benjamin was watching his entire world collapse while the woman responsible sat across from him, planning baby names and discussing nursery colors. He was supposed to be ecstatic about becoming a father, but instead he felt like he was attending his own funeral. "I'm happy," he lied again, leaning down to kiss her forehead in a gesture that felt like betraying himself. "I'm just overwhelmed. It's a big change." Daisy's smile returned, radiant and trusting. "I know, I'm scared too, but we'll figure it out together, won't we? Like we always do." Together. The word was meaningless now. They weren't partners in this journey. Benjamin was the unwitting victim of an elaborate deception, and Daisy was either a master manipulator or a woman carrying another man's child while genuinely believing it belonged to her husband. He wasn't sure which possibility was worse. At the office, Benjamin threw himself into work with desperate intensity, trying to lose himself in merger documents and acquisition strategies. But every phone call reminded him of Marcus Chen's voice. Every email signature made him think of genetic markers and DNA sequences, and every mention of family businesses sent his mind spiraling back to the inheritance that might now be lost forever. His assistant knocked on his door around noon, interrupting his brooding. "Mr. Lucas, Dr. Morrison is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Benjamin's stomach dropped. Had Dr. Morrison discovered something new, more evidence of Daisy's betrayal? He waved the doctor in, noting the grim expression on the older man's face. "Benjamin, I'm sorry to bother you at work, but something has come to my attention that I felt you needed to know immediately." Dr. Morrison closed the office door behind him and approached Benjamin's desk with the careful steps of a man delivering a death sentence. "What now?" Benjamin asked, not sure he could handle any more revelations. "I received a call this morning from Dr. James Patterson, the fertility specialist your wife has been seeing. He's concerned about some irregularities in her treatment records and wanted to consult with me as her primary physician." Benjamin's hands gripped the arms of his chair. What kind of irregularities? It appears that Daisy hasn't been entirely truthful about her medical history. Dr. Patterson discovered discrepancies in the information she provided about her previous pregnancies and fertility treatments. More concerning, there are gaps in her records that suggest she may have been receiving treatments from multiple specialists without proper coordination. The implications hit Benjamin like a sledgehammer. Not only had Daisy been unfaithful, but she'd been systematically lying to medical professionals about her reproductive health. The level of deception required for such an elaborate scheme spoke to a calculating mind that Benjamin had never suspected his wife possessed. "There's something else, Doctor," Morrison continued. "Dr. Patterson mentioned that your wife specifically requested genetic counseling services. She was very interested in understanding how certain genetic traits might be passed down to children, particularly in cases of mixed parentage. Mixed parentage, like a child conceived by a woman of African descent and a man of Asian heritage, like Marcus Chen." Benjamin felt the last pieces of his faith in his marriage crumble into dust. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. This was premeditated, calculated betrayal designed to fool him into accepting another man's child as his own heir. "What do you recommend?" Benjamin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Legally, you have options. But Benjamin, the longer this pregnancy continues, the more complicated those options become. If you're going to act, you need to do it soon." After Dr. Morrison left, Benjamin sat alone in his office as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across his desk. Outside his window, the city hummed with life and energy, millions of people going about their daily routines, unaware that one man's world was ending floor by floor, revelation by revelation. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus Chen. "Daisy looks radiant these days. Pregnancy suits her." Benjamin stared at the message until the words blurred together. Marcus wasn't just the father of Daisy's child. He was actively taunting Benjamin with his victory. The arrogance was breathtaking, the cruelty absolute. But what destroyed Benjamin more than the betrayal itself was the realization that he still loved her. Despite everything Dr. Morrison had told him, despite the evidence mounting against her, despite the knowledge that she was carrying another man's child, Benjamin's heart refused to let go of the woman who had been his partner, his confidant, his future. Love, he realized, wasn't something you could turn off like a light switch, even when that love was destroying you from the inside out. As the sun set over the city, Benjamin made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't confront Daisy directly. Not yet. He needed more evidence, more proof, more ammunition for the war that was coming. But he also needed to protect himself, his father, and the Lucas legacy from the woman who had infiltrated their family with lies and deception. The game was about to begin, and Benjamin Lucas was finally ready to play. Chapter 4. The Mother's Strength. A woman's greatest power isn't in her tears, it's in her ability to stand unbroken when the world tries to shatter her soul. Daisy Lucas had always possessed intuition that bordered on supernatural. Growing up as daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to survive, she'd learned to read subtle shifts in people's moods, microscopic changes in behavior that signaled danger or opportunity. This survival skill had served her well in the corporate world and initially attracted Benjamin during their first meeting at a charity auction 3.5 years ago. Now, sitting in their bedroom as morning light filtered through silk curtains, that same intuition screamed warnings that made her skin crawl with unease. Benjamin hadn't touched her in a week, not sexually, that she could understand, given the early pregnancy symptoms and their mutual caution about harming the baby. But he hadn't touched her at all. No casual hand on her shoulder when he passed behind her chair. No gentle kiss on her forehead when she was reading. No unconscious reaching for her hand during their evening walks through the estate gardens. For a man who had once been so physically affectionate that Helena had commented acidly on their public displays, this sudden distance was more alarming than if he'd started shouting accusations. Mrs. Lucas. Maria, their housekeeper for the past 2 years, knocked softly on the bedroom door. "Mrs. Helena is here to see you. She's waiting in the morning room." Daisy's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, a protective gesture that had become second nature since learning about the pregnancy. Helena's visits were never casual social calls. The woman operated with the precision of a chess master, every move calculated to achieve maximum advantage. "Tell her I'll be down in a few minutes," Daisy replied, then spent those minutes studying her reflection in the full-length mirror that had belonged to Benjamin's mother. At 8 weeks pregnant, the changes were still subtle. A fullness to her breasts, a slight softening around her waist, a luminous quality to her skin that seemed to glow from within. But it was her eyes that showed the greatest transformation. There was a fierce protectiveness there now, a maternal strength that surprised even her. The morning room was Helena's favorite space for important conversations, bright enough to read facial expressions clearly, but positioned so that whoever sat across from her would be backlit by the windows, making their own emotions harder to discern. Helena sat like a queen holding court, wearing a powder blue suit that probably cost more than most people's cars and jewelry that could have funded a small country's education budget. Her smile was perfect, warm, and absolutely predatory. "Daisy, darling, you look lovely. Pregnancy certainly agrees with you." Helena's voice carried the honey-sweet tone she used when delivering her most poisonous observations. "Thank you." Daisy settled into the chair opposite her mother-in-law, noting how Helena's eyes immediately dropped to her midsection with calculating assessment. "I wanted to talk to you about the baby announcement," Helena continued smoothly. "Charles is so excited about becoming a grandfather, but his health has been fragile lately. I think we need to be very careful about how we handle this situation." Daisy's maternal instincts flared to life. "What do you mean by handle this situation? I'm pregnant with your step-grandson. It's a blessing, not a crisis to be managed." Helena's laugh was like ice crystals forming in summer air. "Of course it's a blessing, dear, but you must understand the complexities of your timing. Charles's will, the inheritance provisions, the pressure Benjamin has been under." She paused delicately. "Some people might see this pregnancy as remarkably convenient." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Daisy felt her cheeks burn with indignation, but she kept her voice steady. "Are you suggesting that I plan to get pregnant now?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Helena replied with false innocence. "I'm simply observing that after 3 years of trying, your success comes at a very fortuitous moment. Just 11 months before Benjamin's 35th birthday, just when the Lucas Empire hangs in the balance." Daisy studied her mother-in-law's perfectly composed face, seeing the calculation behind the concern. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat wrapped in maternal worry. "Helena, I understand that you're protective of this family, but I won't apologize for giving Benjamin the child he's always wanted." "The child he's always wanted," Helena repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that's exactly what makes this so interesting. Tell me, Daisy, have you given any thought to genetic testing? It's quite common these days, especially for women of diverse backgrounds." The euphemism hit like a slap. Daisy's mixed African and European heritage had never been an issue for Benjamin, but Helena had a talent for making anything sound like a liability. "My heritage isn't a medical condition that requires testing," Daisy said quietly, her voice carrying a steel edge that made Helena's eyebrows rise slightly. "Of course not. But genetic compatibility can be so complex, especially when family bloodlines are as specific as the Lucas line. We have such distinctive traits, you know. Charles often jokes that Lucas men are impossible to mistake for anything else." The implication was clear. If this child didn't look unmistakably like a Lucas, questions would be raised. Daisy felt a chill of understanding wash over her. Helena wasn't just making conversation, she was laying groundwork for future accusations. I should probably mention, Helena continued with calculated casualness, that Benjamin seemed quite troubled when he left for work this morning. He's been under such stress lately. The inheritance deadline, the pressure to produce an heir, the challenges in his business relationships. What challenges? Daisy asked, though she suspected she knew where this was heading. Oh, surely you know about his falling out with Marcus Chen. Such a shame. They were such close friends until Marcus tried to steal Benjamin's clients. Benjamin was devastated by the betrayal. He's become quite suspicious of people he once trusted implicitly. There it was. The poison, delivered with surgical precision. Helena was planting seeds of doubt about Marcus, while simultaneously suggesting that Benjamin's trust had been damaged by previous betrayals. It was masterful manipulation disguised as concern. Marcus Chen has nothing to do with our marriage or our baby, Daisy said firmly. Helena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Of course not, dear. I'm simply noting that Benjamin has been hurt before by people he trusted. It's made him cautious, especially now when so much depends on family loyalty. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Helena delivering carefully crafted warnings disguised as advice. She mentioned the importance of prenatal vitamins from reputable sources, suggested that Daisy might want to limit her outside activities during the delicate first trimester, and recommended several specialists who understood the unique needs of Lucas family pregnancies. Each suggestion was reasonable on the surface but carried an undercurrent of control and surveillance. Helena was building a cage around Daisy so subtly that anyone listening would hear only a concerned mother-in-law offering support. After Helena left, Daisy sat in the morning room for a long time, processing the conversation and its implications. She'd always known that Helena resented her marriage to Benjamin, but this felt different, more urgent, more dangerous. Her phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." It was the third time this week he'd avoided coming home for dinner. The third time he'd chosen work over spending time with his newly pregnant wife. Daisy walked to Benjamin's study and settled into his leather chair, surrounded by the awards, photographs, and mementos of his success. On his desk, she noticed a business card for a private investigation firm tucked beneath his laptop. Her blood ran cold. Why would Benjamin need a private investigator? She didn't touch the card, but she memorized the company name and phone number. If Benjamin was having her investigated, she needed to know why, and she needed to protect herself and her baby from whatever storm was brewing. That evening, alone in their massive bedroom, Daisy made several phone calls. First to her own doctor, Dr. Sarah Williams, who had been her physician for 5 years and had guided her through the fertility treatments that had finally resulted in this pregnancy. "Dr. Williams, I need you to send me copies of all my medical records for the past year. Everything. Blood work, test results, treatment protocols, all of it." "Is everything all right, Daisy?" "You sound stressed." "I'm fine. I just want to have comprehensive records of my pregnancy journey, for my own peace of mind." Her second call was to her best friend and former college roommate Jessica, who worked as a family law attorney in Philadelphia. "Jess, I need some legal advice. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to challenge paternity of a child, what would they need to prove their case?" "Daisy, what's going on? Are you and Benjamin having problems?" "Just answer the question, please." Jessica's voice grew serious. "Genetic testing is the gold standard, but there are other factors: timing, opportunity, evidence of infidelity. Why are you asking?" "I'm probably being paranoid, but I want to understand my rights. If someone made false accusations about my baby's paternity, how would I protect myself? Document everything. Medical records, communications, witness statements build a paper trail that supports your version of events. And Daisy, if this isn't hypothetical, you need to be very careful. Paternity disputes can get ugly fast. Her final call was to her mother, who lived in a modest apartment in Baltimore and cleaned office buildings to make ends meet. "Mama, I need you to know something. I'm pregnant." The joy in her mother's voice brought tears to Daisy's eyes. "Oh, baby, that's wonderful news. How's Benjamin? He must be over the moon." "He's adjusting to the idea. Mama, if anything happens to me, I need you to know that this baby is Benjamin's. No matter what anyone says, no matter what accusations they make, this child is a Lucas." "Daisy, you're scaring me. What kind of accusations?" "I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm just being paranoid because of pregnancy hormones. But if I'm not wrong, they're going to try to destroy me. And I need my family to know the truth." After the calls, Daisy lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand protectively covering her growing baby. She could feel the storm gathering around her, could sense the forces aligning against her happiness. But she wasn't the same woman who had been intimidated by Helena's subtle threats during their early marriage. Pregnancy had awakened something fierce and primal in her, a maternal instinct that would fight to the death to protect her child. If they wanted to destroy her, they would have to bring everything they had, because Daisy Lucas wasn't going down without a fight that would shake the foundations of the Lucas Empire itself. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and the first drops of rain began to fall against the glass like tears from heaven itself. Chapter 5. The Family's True Face. The most dangerous enemies are the ones who smile at your table while sharpening their knives beneath it. Charles Lucas had built his empire on the foundation of reading people's souls through their eyes. At 70, despite tremor in his hands and the oxygen tank that followed him like a mechanical shadow, his mind remained sharp enough to slice through deception like a blade through silk, which made his phone call to Benjamin on a grey Thursday morning devastating. "Son, we need to talk. My study. Now." Benjamin found his father behind the massive oak desk that had belonged to 4 generations of Lucas patriarchs, surrounded by legal documents that looked ominous in dim light, filtering through heavy curtains. Charles's face bore the weight of a man who had discovered something threatening everything he'd spent a lifetime building. "Sit down, Benjamin." Charles's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Dr. Morrison paid me a visit yesterday." Benjamin's blood turned to ice water. "Father, I can explain." "Explain what? That my daughter-in-law has been lying to this family for months? That the grandchild I've been celebrating might not even be my blood? That the heir I've been praying for could be nothing more than an elaborate deception?" The words hit Benjamin like physical blows. His father's face had gone grey with exhaustion and betrayal, making him look every one of his 70 years. "Dr. Morrison showed me the genetic analysis," Charles continued, his voice growing steadier with anger. "He explained the impossibilities, the inconsistencies, the evidence that suggests your wife has been playing games with our family's future." Benjamin slumped in his chair, feeling the weight of 3 generations of Lucas legacy pressing down on his shoulders. "I don't know what to do." "What to do?" Charles's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You're going to demand a paternity test. You're going to get definitive proof. And if that child isn't yours, you're going to divorce that woman before she can destroy everything we've built." The clinical coldness in his father's voice chilled Benjamin to the bone. This wasn't the grandfather who had been planning nurseries and choosing baby gifts. This was the ruthless businessman who had crushed competitors and built an empire through sheer force of will. "She's my wife," Benjamin said quietly. "She's a woman who has betrayed your trust and potentially committed fraud against this family," Charles corrected sharply. Marriage is a contract, Benjamin. When one party violates the terms, the contract becomes void. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Helena entered without waiting for permission, her face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. "Charles, darling, you look pale. Should you be having such stressful conversations?" She moved to his side with practiced grace, one hand resting possessively on his shoulder. "Helena knows about the situation," Charles explained to Benjamin. "I had to tell her. She's my wife, and she has a right to know that our family's future is in jeopardy." Benjamin studied Helena's expression, noting the careful balance of shock and sympathy she projected. But there was something else there, something that looked almost like satisfaction, barely concealed beneath her concerned facade. "This is all so shocking," Helena said, her voice trembling with apparent emotion. "I always sensed something was off about Daisy's behavior, but I never imagined anything like this." "What do you mean?" Benjamin asked sharply. Helena hesitated, glancing at Charles, as if seeking permission to continue. "Well, there have been phone calls, late at night. She always claimed they were work-related, but what kind of work requires such secretive conversations?" Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. "You've been listening to her phone calls?" "Not intentionally," Helena replied quickly, "but when you live in the same house, sometimes you overhear things. And Benjamin, I've seen her meeting with men, in coffee shops, in parks, always very discreet, very careful." Each word was a dagger to Benjamin's heart. The woman he'd loved completely had been living a double life right under his nose, and apparently everyone in his family had suspected except him. "There's more," Charles said quietly. "I've been doing some investigating of my own. Our business relationship with the Chen Corporation ended badly, but Marcus Chen has been making inquiries about our family finances, specifically about the inheritance provisions." Benjamin's vision blurred with rage. "He's been planning this." "It appears so," Charles agreed. "The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. A failed business relationship, a seduction of your wife, a pregnancy that conveniently solves our inheritance crisis while potentially placing an outsider's child in line for the Lucas fortune." Helena moved to the window, gazing out at the estate grounds with apparent sadness. "I keep thinking about what this will do to the family name, the scandal, the media attention. Our reputation will be destroyed." "Not if we handle this correctly," Charles said firmly. "We need to control the narrative, gather evidence, build an airtight case before we make any accusations." Benjamin looked between his father and stepmother, seeing them as allies in what was becoming a war against his own wife. The realization should have brought him comfort, but instead it filled him with a profound sense of loss. His marriage wasn't just ending, it was becoming a battlefield where love would be the first casualty. "What about Daisy?" Benjamin asked. "What if she's innocent? What if there's another explanation?" Charles and Helena exchanged a look that spoke volumes about their shared skepticism. "Son," Charles said gently, "I understand your reluctance to believe the worst about someone you love, but sometimes love makes us blind to truths that everyone else can see clearly." Adrian chose that moment to enter the study, his face grave with the weight of someone delivering devastating news. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know immediately." Adrian held up his phone, showing a text message thread. "I've been contacted by Marcus Chen. He wants to meet with me to discuss mutual interests regarding the Lucas family situation." The room fell silent, except for the rhythmic wheeze of Charles's oxygen concentrator. Benjamin felt the last pieces of his faith in his marriage crumble into ash. "He's making his move," Charles said quietly. "This confirms everything we suspected." Adrian nodded gravely. He seemed very confident, almost cocky, like he knows something we don't. Or like he's been planning this for months and feels ready to execute his plan, Helena added, with grim satisfaction. Benjamin stood abruptly, pacing to the window where he could see the gardens where he and Daisy had walked just weeks ago, planning their future and dreaming about their child. Now those memories felt like scenes from someone else's life. "What do you recommend?" he asked, his voice hollow. Charles pulled out a business card and slid it across the desk. "Thomas Whitmore, best private investigator in the city, completely discreet, absolutely thorough. He'll get us the evidence we need to protect this family." Benjamin stared at the card, recognizing it as the same one he'd seen tucked under his laptop. Someone had already been planning this investigation. "How long has he been working for us?" Benjamin asked quietly. "Just a few days," Charles admitted. "I wanted to verify Dr. Morrison's concerns before involving you. Whitmore has already uncovered some disturbing information." Helena returned to Charles's side, her hand again finding his shoulder in a gesture of support. "We're doing this to protect you, Benjamin. To protect all of us." "What did Whitmore find?" Benjamin asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Charles opened a manila folder and spread photographs across the desk, like evidence in a murder trial. Benjamin's heart stopped as he recognized Daisy in each image, talking to a man in a coffee shop, embracing someone in a parking garage, entering a medical building with a companion who wasn't Benjamin. The man in these photos has been identified as Dr. James Patterson, a fertility specialist, Charles explained clinically. "He's been treating your wife for several months without your knowledge." Benjamin picked up one of the photographs, studying Daisy's face for signs of deception or guilt. Instead, he saw only the woman he'd fallen in love with, animated and happy as she spoke with someone the camera had positioned to look suspicious. "These could be innocent," Benjamin said weakly. "They could be," Adrian agreed with false sympathy. "But taken together with everything else." The weight of evidence felt crushing. Medical reports, photographs, witness statements, phone records, it all painted a picture of systematic deception that Benjamin couldn't explain away with wishful thinking. "I need to think," Benjamin said finally. "Don't think too long," Charles warned. "Every day that passes makes this situation more complicated. If you're going to act, you need to do it before the pregnancy advances too far." As Benjamin left his father's study, he felt like he was carrying the weight of the entire Lucas legacy on his shoulders. Behind him, he could hear Helena's voice offering Charles comfort and support, their conversation continuing in hushed tones that spoke of strategies and contingencies. Walking through the halls of the mansion where he'd grown up, Benjamin realized that his family had already made their decision about Daisy's guilt. They were moving forward with plans to destroy her, and they expected him to fall in line. The only question remaining was whether Benjamin Lucas still had the strength to fight for the woman he loved, or if the evidence against her had finally killed the last remnants of his faith in their marriage. Outside, storm clouds continued to gather, and the first rumble of thunder echoed across the estate, like a warning of the devastation to come. Chapter 6. The Public Humiliation. There are two kinds of destruction, the kind that happens in darkness, and the kind that happens under spotlights while 500 people watch your world burn. The annual Lucas Foundation Gala was legendary in high society circles, an event where million-dollar donations were made as casually as ordering champagne, where political careers were launched or destroyed with whispered conversation, and where the Lucas family displayed their power like peacocks showing feathers. This year's theme was Building Futures, and the irony wasn't lost on Benjamin as he adjusted his black tie in their bedroom mirror. Beside him, Daisy smoothed silk of her emerald green gown, fabric expertly tailored to accommodate her 10-week pregnancy bump while maintaining elegance that would have made Grace Kelly weep with envy. Her reflection showed a woman at the height of beauty, skin glowing with pregnancy hormones, eyes bright with excitement, completely unaware that tonight would be the last time she'd attend a Lucas family event as Benjamin's wife. "You look stunning," Benjamin said, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting in his father's study. 2 weeks of Thomas Whitmore's investigation, uncovering more evidence of Daisy's supposed betrayal. 2 weeks of Benjamin watching his wife and seeing either an innocent woman or the most accomplished actress alive. "Thank you." Daisy's smile could have powered the entire city. She moved to straighten his bow tie, her touch gentle and familiar. "I'm nervous about tonight. First public appearance since announcing the pregnancy. Everyone will be watching us." Everyone would indeed be watching. Helena had made sure of that, dropping carefully crafted hints throughout high society about interesting developments in the Lucas family situation. The gossip mill had been churning for days with speculation about the heir, the inheritance, and the beautiful young wife who had captured Benjamin's heart. "Are you feeling all right?" Benjamin asked, noting the slight pallor beneath her makeup. "Just tired. Dr. Patterson says fatigue is normal at this stage." She paused, studying his reflection. "Benjamin, you've seemed so distant lately. Is everything okay between us?" The question hung in the air like a sword over both their heads. Benjamin met her eyes in the mirror, searching once again for signs of deception and finding only love mixed with growing concern. "Everything's fine," he lied, the words becoming easier each time he said them. "Just stress about work." Downstairs, the Lucas mansion had been transformed into a glittering palace. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow lights across walls lined with priceless art, while an orchestra played classical music that floated through rooms filled with the most powerful people in 3 states. Waiters in white gloves carried champagne and hors d'oeuvres to guests who collectively controlled more wealth than most small nations. Charles Lucas held court in the main ballroom, his oxygen tank discreetly hidden behind an ornate screen, while he charmed donors and dignitaries with the skill of a man who had spent 7 decades perfecting the art of influence. Helena glided through the crowd like a queen among subjects, her sapphire blue gown commanding attention, while she spread carefully chosen words about family loyalty and the importance of bloodlines. "Benjamin! Daisy!" The voice belonged to Senator Patricia Walsh, a longtime family friend whose political career had been largely funded by Lucas donations. "Congratulations on the wonderful news. Charles must be over the moon about becoming a grandfather." "He's very excited," Daisy replied warmly, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach in a gesture that had become second nature. "And the timing couldn't be more perfect," the senator continued with a knowing smile. "Right before Benjamin's birthday deadline. It's like a fairy tale ending." Benjamin felt Daisy's slight stiffening beside him. The comment about timing had hit its mark, planting another seed of doubt about the pregnancy's convenient scheduling. "Love doesn't follow timetables," Daisy said quietly, but Benjamin caught the defensive edge in her voice. As the evening progressed, similar comments came from other guests. Each seemingly innocent congratulation carried an undercurrent of speculation about timing, convenience, and the remarkable good fortune of the Lucas family's reproductive success, just when it was needed most. Helena had orchestrated the gossip campaign with surgical precision, never making direct accusations, but ensuring that every conversation planted questions about Daisy's motives and the pregnancy's legitimacy. "Mr. Lucas?" Thomas Whitmore appeared at Benjamin's elbow like a shadow given form. The private investigator looked unremarkable, medium height, average build, forgettable face, which Benjamin supposed was exactly what made him effective at his job. "Not here," Benjamin hissed, glancing around to ensure no one had noticed the exchange. "It's urgent," Whitmore insisted. "We have a situation developing. I need 5 minutes." Against his better judgment, Benjamin followed the investigator to his father's study, leaving Daisy chatting with a group of charity board members about prenatal nutrition and nursery decorating. "What's so urgent it couldn't wait until tomorrow?" Benjamin demanded. Whitmore pulled out his phone and showed Benjamin a series of photographs taken that afternoon. "Your wife left the house at 2 p.m., claiming she had a doctor's appointment. These photos show her actual activities." Benjamin's heart stopped as he studied the images. Daisy entering a downtown medical building, emerging an hour later with a man Benjamin didn't recognize, embracing the stranger in what looked like an intimate goodbye. "Who is he?" Benjamin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Marcus Chen," Whitmore replied. "He uses his middle name professionally, but his full name is Marcus James Chen, the same Marcus Chen you've been investigating." The revelation hit Benjamin like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just potentially the father of Daisy's child, he was actively involved in her pregnancy, attending her medical appointments, playing a role that should have belonged to Benjamin. "There's more," Whitmore continued relentlessly. "I've confirmed that Dr. Patterson, the fertility specialist your wife has been seeing, is actually Marcus Chen's cousin. The medical practice is a family business." Benjamin felt the room spinning around him. The web of deception was so elaborate, so carefully constructed that it spoke to months of planning and coordination between multiple parties. "They're all working together," Benjamin realized aloud. "It appears so. And, sir, there's something else you need to know. Tonight's event. They're planning something. I've intercepted communications suggesting that some kind of confrontation is planned for this evening." Before Benjamin could respond, the study door burst open and Adrian rushed in, his face flushed with excitement and apparent concern. "Benjamin, thank God I found you. We have a problem, a huge problem." "What now?" Benjamin asked, feeling like he was drowning in an ocean of betrayals. "Marcus Chen is here. At the gala, Daisy invited him." The words hit Benjamin like a tsunami of rage and betrayal. His wife had brought her lover to their family's most important social event, flaunting her affair in front of 500 guests and the most powerful people in the state. "Where?" Benjamin's voice came out as a growl. "The East Terrace. They're talking very intimately. People are starting to notice." Benjamin felt something fundamental break inside his chest. Whatever love and trust had survived the past weeks of evidence and doubt shattered completely in that moment. His wife wasn't just having an affair, she was humiliating him publicly, destroying his reputation and his family's name in front of everyone who mattered. He walked toward the East Terrace like a man heading to his own execution, with Adrian and Whitmore following at a discreet distance. The closer he got, the more guests he noticed whispering behind raised champagne glasses, their eyes following his progress with the hungry anticipation of spectators at a gladiator match. The French doors to the terrace stood open, allowing the warm evening air to flow into the ballroom along with the sound of intimate conversation. Benjamin stepped outside and saw them immediately, Daisy and Marcus Chen standing close together near the marble railing, her hand resting on his arm while he leaned down to whisper something in her ear. Marcus Chen looked exactly like Benjamin remembered, tall, handsome, with the kind of effortless charisma that made people want to trust him. He was also unmistakably Asian, which made Dr. Morrison's comments about genetic markers suddenly take on devastating clarity. "Daisy." Benjamin's voice cut across the terrace like a blade. Both figures turned toward him, and Benjamin saw his wife's face transform from animated happiness to pure terror in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus, by contrast, smiled with the satisfied expression of a man who had been waiting for this moment. "Benjamin," Daisy breathed, her hand dropping from Marcus's arm as if it had caught fire. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Benjamin's voice grew louder, carrying back into the ballroom where conversations had stopped, and all attention was focused on the drama unfolding on the terrace. "Explain why you invited your lover to our family's gala. Explain why you're carrying his child while lying to my dying father about giving him a grandchild." The accusations hung in the air like poison gas. Behind Benjamin, he could hear the collective gasp of 500 guests as his words carried through the open doors. Senator Patricia Walsh dropped her champagne glass, the crystal shattering against marble with a sound like breaking dreams. Board members of Fortune 500 companies pulled out their phones, already crafting statements to distance themselves from the Lucas family scandal. Camera phones appeared like mushrooms after rain. Dozens of society guests capturing the destruction of one of America's most powerful families in real time. The footage would be on social media within minutes, on morning news shows within hours. "Benjamin, no," Daisy said, stepping toward him with her hands outstretched in supplication. "You don't understand. Marcus is my cousin, my mother's sister's son. He's Dr. Patterson's business partner, nothing more." But Benjamin was beyond listening to explanations. The genetic tests, the secret meetings, the convenient timing, everything pointed to betrayal so complete that even the truth sounded like another lie. "You destroyed our marriage, humiliated our family, and committed fraud against the Lucas dynasty for money. Was it worth it?" Benjamin's voice carried across the terrace and into the ballroom where conversations had stopped completely. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the society columnist whose words could destroy reputations with a single paragraph, was frantically taking notes. The mayor's wife whispered frantically to the governor's chief of staff. 3 international ambassadors exchanged meaningful glances that spoke of cancelled business deals and withdrawn support. "The baby is yours," Daisy whispered, but her voice was lost in the murmur of shock from the watching crowd. Marcus Chen stepped forward, his handsome face wearing an expression of false sympathy. "Benjamin, this is a difficult situation for everyone involved. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Get out." Benjamin's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. "Get out of my house, away from my wife, and if I ever see you near my family again, I'll destroy you." Marcus nodded gravely, as if accepting a reasonable request rather than a threat. He turned to Daisy and spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Call me when you're ready to discuss our options." The implication was clear and devastating. Marcus was offering Daisy an alternative to her marriage, a way out of the Lucas family that would take Benjamin's child with her. As Marcus walked away, Benjamin turned back to his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since their wedding day. She stood alone on the terrace, tears flowing freely down her cheeks, one hand protectively covering her stomach, while the other reached toward him in futile supplication. "Benjamin, please," she whispered, "let me explain. Nothing is what it seems." But Benjamin was done listening to explanations. He turned away from the woman who had destroyed his world and walked back into the ballroom where 500 guests parted before him like the Red Sea. Behind him, Daisy's sobs echoed across the terrace, but he didn't look back. That chapter of his life was over, ended not in the privacy of a lawyer's office, but under the crystal chandeliers of high society, with the most powerful people in 3 states as witnesses to his humiliation. The Lucas Foundation gala continued around him, but Benjamin Lucas felt like a ghost at his own funeral, watching the death of everything he had believed about love, trust, and the woman who had once been his entire world. Chapter 7. The Crumbling Dynasty. A man can lose everything he owns and still be wealthy, but lose everything he believes in, and he becomes the poorest soul alive. 6 months after the gala that destroyed his marriage, Benjamin Lucas sat in his corner office 60 floors above the city, watching his empire crumble one phone call at a time. Divorce papers lay signed on his mahogany desk, next to newspaper clippings that chronicled his fall from respected business leader to cautionary tale about the dangers of marrying for love instead of strategy. "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom, with carefully neutral tone she'd adopted since the scandal broke. "The board is requesting another emergency meeting. Stock prices dropped another 12% overnight." Benjamin didn't bother responding. What was the point? Every business decision he'd made since the gala had been viewed through the lens of his personal catastrophe. Partners questioned his judgment, investors doubted his stability, and competitors circled like vultures sensing weakness. The Lucas media empire, built over 4 generations, was hemorrhaging money and respect at a rate that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. The man who had once commanded respect in boardrooms across 3 continents now couldn't get his phone calls returned by executives who used to beg for his attention. The irony was devastating. In trying to protect his family's legacy from Daisy's deception, Benjamin had destroyed it more thoroughly than any external enemy ever could have. His phone buzzed with yet another text from Helena. "Charles had another episode last night. Doctor says stress is killing him faster than the cancer. When are you coming home?" Home. The word felt meaningless now. The Lucas mansion, where he'd grown up dreaming of the family he'd one day raise within its walls, had become a mausoleum of broken dreams and bitter regrets. He'd moved into a downtown penthouse after the divorce, claiming he needed space to focus on business, but the truth was simpler and more pathetic. He couldn't bear to walk the halls where he'd once been happy. A knock on his office door interrupted his brooding. Benjamin looked up to see Thomas Whitmore standing in the doorway, his unremarkable face wearing an expression that Benjamin had learned to associate with bad news. "Mr. Lucas, I have the final report you requested." Whitmore placed a thick manila folder on the desk with the reverence of someone handling explosive material. Benjamin stared at the folder without opening it. 6 months of investigation, thousands of dollars spent on surveillance and genetic analysis, all leading to this moment of absolute confirmation about his ex-wife's betrayal. "Just tell me," Benjamin said wearily. "Is the child mine or not?" Whitmore's hesitation spoke volumes before he even opened his mouth. "Sir, the results are complicated." "Complicated how?" Benjamin's voice carried a dangerous edge. "DNA is either a match or it isn't. The child is definitely yours, biologically speaking, 100% certainty." Whitmore's words should have brought relief, but his tone suggested they were only the beginning of a larger nightmare. Benjamin's world tilted sideways. "What?" "The twins. Yes, it's twins. Both show clear genetic markers identifying you as the biological father. But, sir, that's not the complicated part." Twins. Daisy had given birth to twins, and Benjamin had missed everything. The pregnancy complications, the delivery, the first moments of his children's lives. He'd been so consumed with rage and betrayal that he'd never even asked about the birth. "What's the complicated part?" Benjamin asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Whitmore opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents that made Benjamin's blood run cold. Medical records, birth certificates, and genetic analyses that painted a picture far different from what Benjamin had believed for the past 6 months. "Your ex-wife never had an affair with Marcus Chen," Whitmore said quietly. "She never had an affair with anyone. Every piece of evidence we found, every photograph, every suspicious meeting, it was all legitimate medical consultations related to her high-risk pregnancy." The words hit Benjamin like a series of physical blows. That's impossible. The fertility specialist, the secret meetings, the genetic incompatibilities. Dr. Patterson is Marcus Chen's cousin, but that's where the connection ends. Your wife was referred to him by her primary physician because of complications related to carrying twins. The treatments were experimental and required extensive monitoring. Benjamin felt like he was drowning in a sea of revelations that invalidated everything he'd believed for the past year. Then, why didn't she tell me? According to her medical records, she tried, multiple times, but you'd already made up your mind about her guilt. Whitmore's voice carried a subtle note of accusation. "The real question, sir, is who convinced you she was having an affair in the first place?" The answer was so obvious that Benjamin felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. Dr. Morrison, Helena, Adrian, they'd all played their parts in a symphony of deception that had destroyed his marriage and his family. "There's more," Whitmore continued relentlessly. "I've been investigating the source of the false medical reports that convinced you of your wife's infidelity. The genetic analyses were fabricated, the fertility records were altered, and the photographs were carefully staged to create false impressions." Benjamin's hands shook as he processed the magnitude of his mistakes. "Who was behind it?" "Your stepmother and stepbrother, working in coordination with Dr. Morrison. They've been planning this for over a year, waiting for the right moment to destroy your marriage and eliminate any potential heir who might threaten their inheritance claims." The revelation was so monstrous that Benjamin struggled to comprehend it. His own family had orchestrated the destruction of his marriage, the loss of his children, and the collapse of his business empire, all for money. "Helena knew Daisy was innocent?" Benjamin's voice came out as a whisper. "Not only did she know, but she was the one who convinced Dr. Morrison to provide false medical evidence. The entire conspiracy was designed to make you believe your wife was unfaithful, so you'd divorce her before the children were born." Benjamin remembered Helena's perfectly timed comments, her subtle suggestions about genetic testing, her apparent concern about family bloodlines. Every word had been calculated to plant seeds of doubt and nurture them into the poisonous tree that had destroyed his marriage. "And my father?" Benjamin asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Completely manipulated. Helena showed him the same false evidence she showed you. His reaction was genuine. He truly believed Daisy had betrayed the family." Benjamin felt tears burning behind his eyes for the first time since the divorce. His father, already weakened by cancer and the stress of potentially losing the family legacy, had been used as an unwitting weapon against Benjamin's happiness. "Where is Daisy now?" Benjamin asked, his voice breaking on her name. "Living in a modest apartment downtown, working as a freelance consultant to support herself and the twins. She's struggling, sir. The divorce settlement was minimal, and she's refused all attempts at reconciliation from your family." Benjamin's heart shattered completely. While he'd been drowning in self-pity and business failures, the mother of his children had been working multiple jobs to survive, raising his sons alone because he'd been too proud and too stupid to see through his family's lies. "The twins," Benjamin said. "What are their names?" Whitmore consulted his notes. "Charles Benjamin Lucas and Elizabeth Rose Lucas. Named after your grandfather and your mother." The names hit Benjamin like daggers to the heart. Even after everything he'd put her through, Daisy had honored his family with her children's names. She'd given his sons the Lucas name, despite having every reason to hate everything it represented. "I need to see them," Benjamin said, standing abruptly. "Sir, I should warn you. Your ex-wife has made it clear that she doesn't want any contact with the Lucas family. She's built a new life, and she's protective of the children." Benjamin looked out his office window at the city where his sons were growing up without him, where the woman he'd loved was struggling to survive because of his failures as a husband and a man. "Helena and Adrian," Benjamin said quietly. "What's their situation now?" "Legally protected by the statute of limitations on most of their actions. Financially, they stand to inherit everything if your father dies without acknowledging legitimate heirs." The cruel irony was perfect. By destroying Benjamin's marriage, Helena and Adrian had eliminated the very grandchildren who could have fulfilled Charles's requirements for inheritance. They'd created the exact scenario they'd been trying to prevent, except now they were the beneficiaries of the chaos they'd sown. "And my father's health?" "Declining rapidly. The stress of the past year has accelerated his cancer progression. His doctors give him 6 months at most." Benjamin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a year's worth of mistakes crushing down on him. He'd lost his wife, his children, his business empire, and now he was losing his father, all because he'd been too quick to believe lies and too slow to trust in love. "Mr. Lucas," Whitmore said gently, There might still be time to fix some of this. Your ex-wife is a remarkable woman. She might be willing to listen if you approach her the right way." Benjamin laughed bitterly. "Why would she listen to anything I have to say? I publicly humiliated her, divorced her while she was pregnant, and abandoned my children based on lies. I'm probably the last person on earth she wants to see." "Maybe. Or maybe she's been waiting for you to discover the truth and come back to your family." Benjamin stared at his reflection in the office window, seeing a man who had everything handed to him and managed to destroy it all through pride, stupidity, and misplaced trust. The question now was whether he had the courage to face the woman he'd wronged and beg for a forgiveness he didn't deserve. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the city, and Benjamin Lucas realized that the real tempest was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Grandfather's Wisdom. A dying man's last words carry the weight of eternity, especially when they reveal the lies that destroyed everything he held dear. The Lucas mansion felt like a tomb as Benjamin walked through its marble halls for the first time in 6 months. Every room held memories of the family he'd lost. Every portrait on walls seemed to judge him for his failures, and every step echoed with ghosts of conversations that had led to his downfall. His father's bedroom had been converted into a medical facility with oxygen tanks, monitoring equipment, and constant presence of nurses who moved like shadows through darkened space. Charles Lucas, once a titan of industry who commanded respect from world leaders, now lay propped against silk pillows, his frame diminished by cancer and the weight of a year's worth of devastating revelations. "Benjamin." Charles's voice was barely above a whisper, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had built an empire. "You came." "Of course I came." Benjamin settled into the chair beside his father's bed, noting how much weight Charles had lost since their last meeting. The man who had once filled boardrooms with his presence now seemed fragile as paper, his breathing labored even with the oxygen support. "How are you feeling?" Charles's laugh was weak but bitter, followed by a coughing fit that brought flecks of blood to his lips. "Like a fool. Like an old man who was manipulated by people he trusted and destroyed his own family in the process." His voice broke with emotion Benjamin had never heard from the iron-willed patriarch. "I helped destroy my grandson's chance to know their grandfather. That's my legacy, a dying man who chose money over love." Benjamin felt tears burning behind his eyes. "Father, you didn't know." "I should have known!" Charles's voice cracked with anguish. "I built this empire by reading people, by seeing through deception. But I was so afraid of losing our bloodline, so terrified of the family name dying with me, that I became the weapon Helena used to destroy the very future I was trying to protect." Charles reached with trembling hands for a framed photo on his nightstand. A picture of Benjamin as a baby, held by his mother just weeks before she died, giving birth to his stillborn sister. "Your mother died bringing life into this world. She would be horrified to know I helped drive away the mother of her grandchildren." Benjamin's heart clenched. Whitmore had prepared him for this conversation, had warned him that Charles now knew the truth about Helena and Adrian's conspiracy, but seeing the devastation in his father's eyes was almost unbearable. "Helena told you," Benjamin said. It wasn't a question. "She confessed everything last night." Charles struggled to sit up straighter, his breathing labored. "Thought I was too close to death to do anything about it. She was wrong." Benjamin felt a spark of hope. "What did she tell you?" "Everything. The bribes to Dr. Morrison, the falsified medical records, the staged photographs, the elaborate plan to destroy your marriage and eliminate any legitimate heirs." Charles's voice grew stronger with anger. "She's been planning this since the day she married me, Benjamin. Everything. Our marriage, her relationship with you and Adrian, her supposed love for this family, it was all calculated to position herself as the sole beneficiary of the Lucas fortune." The confirmation of Benjamin's worst suspicions should have brought satisfaction, but instead it only deepened his sense of loss. "Why are you telling me this now? The damage is already done. Because I'm dying, and I refuse to let my legacy be built on lies and betrayal." Charles reached for a thick manila folder on his bedside table, his hands trembling with effort. "I've been working with my attorneys for the past week, ever since Helena's confession. This is my new will." Benjamin stared at the legal documents his father held. "Father, you don't need to." "I absolutely do." Charles's voice carried the authority that had made him one of the most powerful men in the country. "Helena and Adrian destroyed my family for money. They manipulated my love for you into a weapon against your happiness. They turned me into an accomplice in the destruction of my own grandchildren's future." Tears burned behind Benjamin's eyes. "You didn't know. None of us knew. I should have known." Charles's voice broke with regret. "I built my empire on the ability to read people, to see through deception and manipulation, but I was blind to the serpents in my own home because I wanted to believe in family loyalty." Charles opened the folder and pulled out photographs that made Benjamin's breath catch in his throat. Pictures of two babies, his sons, sleeping peacefully in matching cribs, their tiny faces bearing unmistakable Lucas features. "Your children," Charles said softly. "Charles Benjamin and Elizabeth Rose. I had a private investigator take these photos yesterday." Benjamin's hands shook as he studied the faces of the sons he'd never met. They were beautiful, perfect, and completely innocent of the adult failures that had shaped their young lives. "They looked like you did as a baby," Charles continued. "Same nose, same stubborn chin. And their mother. Benjamin, she's raised them beautifully. Despite everything we put her through, she's given them love and stability." "Have you met them?" Benjamin asked, his voice barely audible. Number Daisy made it clear that the Lucas family is not welcome in their lives. "Can you blame her?" Charles's expression was heavy with shame. "We destroyed her marriage, humiliated her publicly, and abandoned her when she needed us most. She has every right to protect her children from us." Benjamin set the photographs aside, unable to look at them without feeling like his heart was being torn apart. "What's in the new will?" "Justice," Charles said simply. "Helena gets nothing. Her marriage to me will be revealed as the fraud it always was, and I'm pursuing legal action to recover every penny she's stolen from this family over the years. And Adrian? Adrian is Helena's son, not mine. He has no claim to the Lucas legacy, legal or moral." Charles's voice grew cold. "But you, Benjamin, are still my heir, and your sons are still my grandsons, regardless of the circumstances that led to their births." Benjamin felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the Lucas empire belongs to you and your children. Helena's conspiracy doesn't change the fact that you have two legitimate sons who carry our bloodline." Charles struggled to sit up further. "But Benjamin, inheriting the money means nothing if you don't fight to reclaim your family." "Daisy won't even speak to me," Benjamin said quietly. "I destroyed everything between us. There's no coming back from what I did." "There's always a way back if the love is real," Charles replied with the wisdom of a man facing his own mortality. "But it requires more courage than building a business empire. It requires admitting you were completely wrong and proving you deserve a second chance." Charles reached for another document from the folder. "I've had my lawyers prepare something else, a trust fund for your sons, managed by Daisy until they reach adulthood, $50 million each with provisions for education, healthcare, and anything else they might need." Benjamin's eyes widened. "That's incredibly generous, but Daisy will never accept it. She'll see it as guilt money." "Then don't present it as guilt money. Present it as what it is, a grandfather's love for grandsons he may never get to meet." Charles's voice grew weaker, the effort of the conversation taking its toll. "And Benjamin, there's something else you need to know about Helena's conspiracy." "What?" "She didn't just target your marriage. She's been systematically sabotaging your business relationships, spreading rumors about your stability and judgment. The company's recent failures aren't entirely due to your personal problems. They're the result of a coordinated campaign to destroy your professional reputation." The revelation explained so much about the past year's business disasters. Partners who had inexplicably withdrawn from deals, investors who had suddenly lost confidence, competitors who had seemed to know Benjamin's strategies before he implemented them. She wanted to ensure that even if you somehow survived the divorce, you'd be financially ruined and professionally destroyed, Charles continued. "The perfect revenge for a woman who spent 15 years planning to steal everything our family built." Benjamin felt anger burning in his chest, not just at Helena and Adrian, but at himself for being so easily manipulated. "How did we not see it?" "Because we trusted family," Charles said sadly, "and because Helena is exceptionally skilled at long-term manipulation. She studied our weaknesses for years and exploited them with surgical precision." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. One of the nurses entered with medication and a gentle reminder that Charles needed rest. "Just a few more minutes," Charles told the nurse, then turned back to Benjamin with urgent intensity. "Son, I don't have much time left. My doctors think I have days, not weeks." Benjamin's throat tightened. "Father, listen to me. I'm going to die knowing I helped destroy the happiness of the two people I love most in this world, you and Daisy. I can't fix that, but you can." Charles gripped Benjamin's hand with surprising strength. "Fight for her, Benjamin. Fight for your sons. Show them that love is stronger than pride, that family is worth more than money, and that a Lucas man doesn't give up when something truly matters. What if it's too late? What if she's moved on? Then you'll know you tried everything. But Benjamin, a woman doesn't name her children after her ex-husband's family if she's truly moved on. She's waiting for you to become the man she fell in love with, the man who fought for everything he believed in." Charles released Benjamin's hand and settled back against his pillows, exhaustion overtaking him. "There's one more thing in that folder, a letter I wrote to Daisy, explaining everything. My confession, my apology, and my blessing for whatever future you two might build together." Benjamin picked up the sealed envelope with Daisy's name written in his father's distinctive handwriting. "Why are you giving this to me instead of sending it directly?" "Because some conversations require presence, not just words on paper. If you're going to win back your family, you need to face her yourself and prove that you're willing to fight for what you lost." As Benjamin prepared to leave, Charles called out one final time, "Benjamin, when you see my grandsons, tell them their grandfather loved them from the moment he knew they existed. Tell them the Lucas name means something because of the legacy they'll carry forward, not because of the mistakes their elders made." Benjamin nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. He walked toward the door, carrying the weight of his father's forgiveness and the responsibility of rebuilding everything that had been destroyed. Behind him, Charles Lucas closed his eyes and smiled for the first time in months, knowing that he'd finally done something right in the wreckage of his family's legacy. Chapter 9. The Sins Revealed. Truth is a double-edged sword. It can set you free or destroy everything you have left to lose. The modest apartment building where Daisy lived with his sons stood in stark contrast to the Lucas mansion where Benjamin had grown up. No marble columns, no crystal chandeliers, no armies of servants, just simple brick structure in a middle-class neighborhood where children played in small courtyards and mothers hung laundry on fire escapes. Benjamin sat in his car for an hour, watching the building's entrance and wrestling with cowardice that had nothing to do with business mergers or corporate warfare. This was different. This was about facing the woman whose life he'd destroyed, and the children who didn't even know he existed. At 3:30 p.m., the front door opened, and Benjamin's heart stopped completely. Daisy emerged carrying 2 car seats, her movements efficient and practiced. She looked thinner than he remembered, her once lustrous hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably came from a discount store rather than the designer boutiques she'd once frequented as a Lucas wife. But she was still the most beautiful woman Benjamin had ever seen. Behind her, an older black woman, Daisy's mother, Benjamin realized, held the door open while managing a diaper bag and purse. The grandmother he'd never met was helping with the grandsons he'd never acknowledged. Benjamin watched as Daisy carefully secured the car seats in the back of a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had definitely seen better days. Through the car windows, he caught glimpses of small faces and tiny hands, and his chest felt like it was being crushed by the weight of everything he'd missed. As Daisy drove away, Benjamin made a decision that terrified him more than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He followed at a distance, not to spy or gather evidence, but to understand the life his children were living without him. The Honda pulled into the parking lot of a pediatrician's office in a strip mall, and Benjamin watched from across the street as Daisy carefully lifted both car seats, her mother gathering supplies with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. They disappeared into the medical building, and Benjamin was left alone with his thoughts and the manila folder containing his father's letter. 45 minutes later they emerged, Daisy carrying one fussy baby, while her mother managed the other car seat and supplies. Benjamin could hear crying from across the parking lot. One of his sons was upset about something, and every instinct he possessed screamed at him to help, to comfort, to be the father these children deserved. Instead, he followed them to a grocery store, then to a pharmacy, then to a small park where Daisy spread a blanket under a tree while her mother kept watch over the babies. Benjamin parked several hundred yards away and used binoculars he'd brought for this exact purpose. Through the lenses, he watched Daisy play with 2 8-month-old boys who were clearly thriving despite their father's absence. One baby, Charles he assumed, had dark hair and serious eyes that reminded Benjamin of his own childhood photos. The other, Elizabeth, was more animated, smiling and reaching for his mother's face with tiny hands. His sons, his children, living full, happy lives without knowing their father existed. Benjamin's phone rang, shattering his surveillance. Helena's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months, he answered. "Benjamin, darling, where are you? Your father is asking for you." The false sweetness in her voice made his skin crawl. "I'm handling some business." "Well, handle it quickly. Charles had another episode this morning, and the doctors aren't optimistic. You should be here with family during this difficult time." Family. The word was obscene, coming from the woman who had systematically destroyed his actual family for money. "I'll be there soon," Benjamin lied, then hung up and returned his attention to the park. Daisy was packing up the blanket, preparing to leave, when Benjamin noticed something that made his blood run cold. A black sedan had been parked at the far end of the lot since they'd arrived, and through his binoculars, Benjamin could see 2 men with cameras taking photographs of Daisy and the children. Helena was still having them watched. Benjamin's hands clenched around the binoculars as he realized the full scope of his stepmother's ongoing conspiracy. She wasn't content with destroying his marriage. She was gathering intelligence on his children, probably planning some new form of manipulation or blackmail. The sedan followed Daisy's Honda when she left the park, maintaining a professional distance that spoke of experienced surveillance. Benjamin fell in behind them, creating a bizarre caravan of watchers, and watched through the busy afternoon traffic. When Daisy returned to her apartment building, the sedan parked across the street and settled in for what looked like a long observation session. Benjamin parked behind them and walked to the driver's side window with the confidence of a man who owned half the city. The window rolled down to reveal a nervous-looking private investigator who clearly recognized Benjamin Lucas. "Mr. Lucas, I can explain." "Shut up and listen," Benjamin said quietly. "You're going to call whoever hired you and tell them the surveillance is over. Then you're going to delete every photograph, every report, and every piece of information you've gathered about my ex-wife and children." "Sir, I have a contract." "Your contract is void." Benjamin pulled out his phone and showed the investigator a bank transfer screen. "I just bought your company. You work for me now, and your first assignment is to forget this family exists." The investigator's partner looked terrified as Benjamin leaned closer to the window. "If I discover that anyone, and I mean anyone, is watching my children without my explicit permission, I will destroy your lives so completely that you'll wish you'd never learned what a camera was. Are we clear?" Both men nodded frantically and drove away, leaving Benjamin alone on the quiet street where his sons were learning to crawl and babble and exist without him. He walked to the apartment building's entrance and stared at the directory until he found it. D. Williams, apartment 3B. She'd taken back her maiden name, erasing the Lucas identity completely. Benjamin climbed 3 flights of stairs, each step feeling like a mile, until he stood outside apartment 3B with his father's letter in one hand and 18 months of regret weighing down his heart. He raised his hand to knock, then froze as he heard voices through the thin door. "Mama, I can't keep doing this." Daisy's voice was thick with exhaustion. "Working 3 jobs, managing the boys alone, pretending I'm strong enough to handle everything." "Baby, you are strong enough," her mother replied gently. "You've been handling everything beautifully. But I'm so tired, Mama, and lonely. Sometimes I look at Charles and Elizabeth and wonder what their father would think of them, if he'd be proud, if he'd love them the way they deserve to be loved." Benjamin's heart shattered completely. She still thought about him, still wondered about his feelings for children he'd never met. "Did you ever love him, really?" Daisy's mother asked. "Or was it just the money and status?" "I loved him more than my own life," Daisy whispered, and Benjamin heard tears in her voice. "I still love him. That's the worst part. After everything he did to me, everything he said about me, I still love Benjamin Lucas, and I hate myself for it." Benjamin pressed his forehead against the door, feeling tears stream down his face for the second time in 2 days. She loved him. Despite the divorce, the humiliation, the abandonment, she still loved him. "The boys ask about their daddy sometimes," Daisy continued. "Well, Charles does. He's old enough to notice that other children have fathers. What am I supposed to tell him? That his daddy threw us away because he believed lies about his mother?" "You tell him that sometimes good people make bad choices," her mother said firmly, "and that his daddy might realize his mistakes someday." "It's too late for that," Daisy said with finality. Benjamin made his choice. He chose his family's money over his wife and children. Some things can't be forgiven. The words hit Benjamin like physical blows. She thought he'd chosen money over family. She had no idea that Helena and Adrian had orchestrated everything, that he'd been manipulated as completely as she had. Benjamin raised his hand to knock again, but stopped when he heard footsteps approaching the door from inside. He stepped back into the stairwell shadows just as the door opened. Daisy emerged carrying a bag of garbage, and Benjamin got his first close look at the mother of his children in over a year. She was thinner, older-looking, with stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. But she was still breathtakingly beautiful, still the woman who had captured his heart at a charity auction and changed his entire world. She walked to the garbage chute at the end of the hall, and Benjamin stepped out of the shadows. "Daisy." She spun around, her face cycling through shock, fear, and something that might have been hope before settling into carefully controlled neutrality. "Benjamin." Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands trembling. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you, to see our children." He held up the manila folder. "To give you this. Our children." Her laugh was bitter. "Since when are they our children? You made it very clear 18 months ago that they weren't yours." "I was wrong." The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of his mistakes. "About everything. Daisy, I know the truth now. About Helena, about Adrian, about the lies they told to destroy our marriage." Her composure cracked slightly. "What truth?" "That you never betrayed me, that the babies were always mine, that I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too stupid and too proud to see I was being manipulated." Daisy stared at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for signs of deception. "You're 18 months too late, Benjamin. I know. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until you know everything." He held out the folder. "My father wrote you a letter. He's dying, Daisy. Cancer. And before he dies, he wanted you to know that he knows the truth too." Her hands shook as she took the folder. "Charles is dying. He has days, maybe a week. The stress of what happened to our family, the guilt over being manipulated into helping destroy our marriage. It's killing him faster than the cancer." Daisy's eyes filled with tears. Despite everything the Lucas family had put her through, she genuinely loved Charles as the grandfather her children would never know. "Read the letter," Benjamin said quietly, "and then decide if you can ever forgive the biggest fool who ever lived." As Daisy opened the folder with trembling hands, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the stairwell below, or the small recording device that had captured every word of their conversation. Helena's final gambit was already in motion, and the truth that Benjamin thought would save his family was about to destroy what little remained of their chance at happiness. Chapter 10. The Love That Conquers All. The greatest victories aren't won in boardrooms or courthouses. They're won in the hearts of the people who choose to love again, despite every reason not to. Daisy's apartment fell silent, except for the sound of paper rustling as she read Charles Lucas's final confession. Benjamin watched her face transform from skepticism to shock to devastating understanding as the full scope of Helena's conspiracy revealed itself through his father's elegant handwriting. "My God," she whispered, sinking onto her small sofa. "The medical records, the photographs, Marcus Chen, everything was fabricated? Every single piece of evidence. Helena and Adrian spent over a year orchestrating the perfect destruction of our marriage." Benjamin sat across from her, maintaining careful distance while his heart screamed to hold her. "Doctor?" Morrison was bribed. The genetic tests were falsified. Even Marcus's appearance at the gala was staged. Daisy's hands shook as she turned to the final page of Charles's letter, where his apology and blessing were written in increasingly shaky handwriting. "Charles wants to meet his grandsons," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Before he dies, he wants to hold the children whose existence he helped me doubt. He's at the hospital now. The doctors say he has maybe 48 hours." From the bedroom came the sound of babies stirring from their nap, and Daisy instinctively moved toward them before stopping. "Benjamin, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman you married. What your family did to me, what you did to me, it changed me. I'm stronger now, but I'm also more guarded. I won't let anyone hurt my children the way I was hurt." "Our children," Benjamin corrected gently, "and you're right to protect them. I failed as a husband and as a father, but Daisy, if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving I can be better." Before she could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Helena's name, and both Benjamin and Daisy froze. "Don't answer it," Benjamin said quickly. But Daisy was already swiping to accept the call, putting it on speaker with a courage that reminded Benjamin why he'd fallen in love with her strength. "Hello, Helena. Daisy, darling. Helena's voice carried false warmth and barely concealed triumph. I understand you've had a visitor this evening. How lovely that Benjamin finally found the courage to face his mistakes. Benjamin and Daisy exchanged alarmed glances. Helena had been watching, listening, planning. What do you want? Daisy asked with steely calm. I want you to understand your position, dear. You see, I have recordings of your conversation tonight. Benjamin's confession, his admission of the family's manipulations. Very interesting material for someone who might want to prove that the Lucas family committed fraud. Benjamin felt ice water flow through his veins. Helena was preparing to use his honesty as a weapon. But here's what makes this fascinating, Helena continued with the satisfaction of a spider explaining her web. If those recordings became public, they would destroy what's left of the Lucas reputation completely. Stock prices would collapse, business partners would flee, and the empire would crumble into dust. Get to the point, Benjamin said. The point, stepson, is simple. Daisy can have her reconciliation with you, and Charles can meet his precious grandsons. But the price is $50 million, a modest sum for the Lucas family, really. Consider it payment for my silence about your father's confession to fraud and conspiracy. Daisy stood slowly, her voice carrying a power that made Helena's manipulations sound small and pathetic by comparison. No. Excuse me? I said no. You can release your recordings, Helena. You can destroy the Lucas name and collapse the business empire. You can expose every lie and conspiracy. Daisy's voice grew stronger with each word. But you cannot threaten my children or their father anymore. Benjamin stared at Daisy in amazement as she continued. Because here's what you don't understand about real strength, Helena. I don't need the Lucas money. I don't need the family name or the social status or any of the things you've spent your life scheming to steal. I have something worth more than all of that. And what's that? Helena's voice had lost its confident edge. I have the love of a good man who made terrible mistakes but found the courage to face them. I have 2 beautiful sons who will grow up knowing their father fought to earn their forgiveness. And I have the knowledge that when you're gone, we'll still be here, still loving each other, still building something real while your legacy turns to dust. Benjamin felt his heart soar as Daisy turned to face him directly. Benjamin Lucas, you destroyed my trust, broke my heart, and abandoned your children when they needed you most. You let pride and fear make you into someone I didn't recognize. Benjamin's heart sank, but Daisy wasn't finished. But you also loved me enough to spend 18 months discovering the truth. You cared enough about our children to risk everything by coming here tonight. And you're brave enough to ask for forgiveness you don't deserve from a woman who has every reason to hate you. She stepped closer, and Benjamin could see his entire future in her dark eyes. The question is, are you brave enough to spend the rest of your life proving that love is stronger than pride? Benjamin dropped to his knees in the small apartment, looking up at the woman who had endured everything and emerged stronger than ever. Daisy Williams, I was an arrogant fool who threw away paradise because I was too weak to trust in love. I can't undo the pain I caused you or get back the time I missed with our children. But if you'll let me, I'll spend every day for the rest of my life earning the right to be your husband and their father. From the bedroom came the sound of babies crying, and Daisy's maternal instincts immediately took over. Come meet your sons, she said simply. The nursery was small but filled with love. 2 cribs positioned so the babies could see each other, walls decorated with pictures Daisy had printed from her phone, toys that had clearly been chosen with care rather than expense. Benjamin's sons, Charles and Elizabeth, were 8 months old, healthy and beautiful and completely perfect. Charles had inherited Benjamin's serious expression and dark hair, while Elizabeth had Daisy's eyes and an infectious smile that could have melted glaciers. Charles, Elizabeth, Daisy said softly, lifting both babies. I'd like you to meet someone very important." Benjamin's hands shook as he held his children for the first time. They studied his face with the intense curiosity of babies meeting a stranger, and Benjamin felt his heart expand in ways he'd never imagined possible. "Hi," he whispered to them. "I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here before." As if understanding the importance of the moment, both babies reached for Benjamin's face with tiny hands, and he felt tears streaming down his cheeks as he realized that forgiveness could come in the smallest gestures. "Helena was right about one thing," Daisy said quietly. "The recordings will destroy the Lucas Empire if she releases them." "Let her release them," Benjamin said, not taking his eyes off his sons. "I'd rather be poor with you and the boys than rich and alone." 3 weeks later, Charles Lucas died peacefully in his sleep, having spent his final days holding his grandsons and watching his son build the kind of love that money couldn't buy. His last words, whispered to baby Charles as the infant slept in his arms, were, "Tell your daddy that love is the only empire worth building." Helena released her recordings in a final act of spite, but by then Benjamin and Daisy had moved to a small house in Portland with their children, starting fresh under Daisy's maiden name. The Lucas Empire crumbled exactly as Helena had planned, but she discovered that destroying something beautiful doesn't make you beautiful. It just makes you empty. The tabloids had their scandal, high society moved on to the next source of gossip, and Helena found herself alone in a mansion filled with everything she'd schemed to own and no one left to share it with. Adrian, realizing his mother's manipulations had destroyed any chance of a real relationship with his stepbrother, disappeared to Europe with what money he could salvage. But in a modest garden where Benjamin Lucas taught his sons to take their first steps, while their mother planted flowers that would bloom every spring like promises of new beginnings, love proved stronger than pride, family trumped fortune, and the only legacy that mattered was the one built by two people who chose each other again, despite every reason not to. When Charles Benjamin Lucas and Elizabeth Rose Williams Lucas spoke their first clear words at 14 months old, it wasn't "Mama" or "Dada." Little Charles pointed to the kitchen where his parents were cooking dinner together, his father's arms around his mother's waist as she stirred pasta sauce, both of them laughing at something Elizabeth had done. And in a voice clear as crystal, he said, "Home." Elizabeth, not to be outdone by her brother, clapped her hands and repeated with a giggle that sounded like pure joy, "Home, home," because home isn't a mansion or an empire or a trust fund. Home is where you're loved unconditionally, where mistakes are forgiven, and where two hearts that were broken apart find their way back to wholeness together. The Lucas dynasty was dead. The Williams-Lucas family was just beginning.